NDP leader Andrea Horwath joins me now from Queen's Park. Hi, Ms. Horwath. Great to see you. Thanks for coming back on the show.
My pleasure as always, Vashi. Thank you for inviting me.
So I would guess that you're not in favor, of course, of the cuts to commissioners and the watchdogs that the government came out with today. But I do remember during the campaign that you also flagged the Liberals' sort of quote unquote bad math on deficits. Do you acknowledge that the government does have to do something to rein in spending or tighten its belt, given the size and the severity of the deficit?
Well, except that that's not what this government's doing. What it's doing is cutting services for everyday families to the tune of $3.2 billion, but then cutting taxes for the rich. And so it's really not getting us anywhere. If they were serious about that commitment around getting the deficit down, they wouldn't be cutting taxes for the rich. And so what we're going to see is the wealthiest amongst us here in Ontario get some pretty great breaks, and everyday families are going to be paying more out of their pockets for the things that they need. We're going to see rent go up, even though we have a housing crisis in Ontario where folks can't afford a roof over their head already. And we're going to see things like children's services and services for those most vulnerable cut to the tune of about $1 billion, the details of which we don't know. We also have a government that's getting rid of universal Medicare, apparently, in Ontario. Again, details aren't out yet, but these are not the things that families need. We've already been tightening our belts in Ontario. Families have been telling me they've been struggling and having a hard time. They need help. They don't need a government that's going to make life even harder.
The government did, though, cut taxes for low-income earners, those who earn an income under $30,000. In fact, they will not pay any provincial income tax. Doesn't that speak to what you're saying?
No. In fact, 2/3 of those folks already don't pay any income taxes because they don't earn enough money to pay income taxes. So again, the Ford government's not being honest about what they're doing. They're saying 1.1 million people are considered to be low-income wage earners, but what they're not saying is that 2/3 of those folks won't qualify for the tax cut because they don't earn enough to pay the taxes in the first place. So
what about those between $30,000 and $38,000 a year?
In fact, the tax cuts that are coming with this fall economic statement favor the richest amongst us by 2 to 1. It's the rich that are going to get the breaks as opposed to everyday struggling families. And that's not going to make this province a fairer, more equitable place, and in fact, quite the opposite. And worse, as the government gets rid of universality, everyday families that are just trying to hang on and make life better for themselves and their kids are going to be paying more and more out of their own pockets. This is the wrong direction. It's going to hurt people.
They're also saying, though, that those earning between $30,000 and $38,000 will pay less taxes too.
Well, again, those folks, if they had gotten a $15 minimum wage, would be gaining about $2,000 annually. Instead, the government's going to give a pittance of a tax break to some of those folks that might put them maybe $200 or $300 in their pockets, meaning they're still going to be out by about $1,700 annually. Again, this is not a fall economic statement that's going to help everyday people. It's a fall economic statement that's going to help the wealthy and going to help Doug Ford's well-connected friends, like his developer friends, who are going to be able to put any price they want on a newly built unit. And if you're here in Toronto, where I am now, everywhere you look, there's a crane in the sky. There's lots of new units coming online, and I can tell you those developers are pretty darn happy with today's economic statement.
Don't they have to do something, though? I mean, with a $14.5 billion deficit, they could have slashed spending a lot more using that argument that the deficit is so big. They didn't. They use words like pragmatic, like modest. They've abandoned any pledge to return to balance. Isn't that more along the lines of something you'd like to see?
No, there's nothing pragmatic about giving tax cuts to the rich. There's nothing pragmatic about making life harder for everyday families. Look, we just did come off of a campaign a couple of months ago, and people told me everywhere I went in Ontario, they're tired of hospitals with people lined up in rows trying to get a bed. They're tired.
But they didn't slash the budget for hospitals.
Well, in fact, we haven't seen the details of what their $3.2 billion in cuts are going to look like. They're talking about cuts to Medicare. They're talking about cuts that are going to mean everyday families are not going to have access to the services they need. They're cutting likely social assistance and Ontario disability support from our most vulnerable. They're getting rid of people like the Child Advocate. Our watchdogs are being scrapped. Our watchdogs for the environment, for children.
Well, they're being folded into other offices.
No, they're being scrapped. I mean, the reason that they've been pulled out of those other offices, like the Ombudsman office in the first place over the years, is because those areas needed some focus. I mean, children, they're voiceless. They're the most vulnerable amongst us. They deserve to have their own watchdog. And in fact, it was the New Democrats that forced the Liberals to finally make that office independent for the child advocate. And we were the last province in the country to do so. So this fall economic statement shows clearly that this government's taking us from bad to worse and dragging us backwards, and it's not what people, I think, expected when they bought Mr. Ford's line on you know, he's for the people. He's not for the people. He's for some people. He's for the wealthy and you know, for developers, for well-connected insiders that he favors.
I take your point about the lack of transparency around what the spending cuts will be, but I wanted to ask you before I let you go. There is sort of this idea about keeping the LCBO open longer. We remember Buckabeer from a few months ago, I think, around the throne speech. Is it effective political strategy to announce things like that, which I imagine a lot of people I know will be talking about tonight, rather than, for example, changes around cash for access?
Yeah, it's a tactic. I mean, it's a tactic that's used by all governments. You know, you look, you throw out a shiny penny and hope that people pay more attention to the shiny penny.
But might it be effective?
Well, I mean, again, we've seen it be effective in the past, so it's possible it'll be effective now. But when folks in Ontario don't have the money in their pockets to be able to go to buy a bottle of wine at 10:30 at night, they're going to see really exactly what this government's done to them.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Ms. Horwath.
Thank you, Vashi.